and welcome to another sneak peek Saturday at the Alameda Free Library. My name is Jenny, and today I'm going to read you the book Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. The subtitle says, From Insults to Pickup Artists, the Truth About Extreme Misogyny and How It Affects Us All. You probably already guessed it. This is a nonfiction book. It's a call number right here. You can find it in our news section. Like always, feel free to place a hold on it, so it's actually available when you want to read it. We're doing things a little different today. I usually read you the flap right here, but we have quite a we have a bit of an introduction that I think would be helpful, and if we have some time left, I'm gonna read you some of the first chapter. Alrighty, so let's get started. Imagine a world which millions of women are raped, beaten, mutilated, abused, or murdered every year because of the simple fact that they are women. Imagine a world in which a hatred of women is actively encouraged with sprawling, purpose-built communities of men dedicated to fueling and inflaming the cause. Imagine a world in which such hatred blends seamlessly with racist rage whores, blamed for contaminating superior bloodlines, invading savages, conjured from hate-fueled imaginations, framed as plunderers of the dehumanized commodity of fragile white women. Imagine a world in which thousands of men band together, united by a common code of vitriolic rage, demonizing and railing against evil, soulless, greedy women, graphically plotting their rape and destruction in a glorious, bigoted uprising. Imagine a world in which some men actually enact such fantasies, killing women in mass murders, leaving behind manifestos explaining the ideology that drove them to commit these acts of terrorism. Imagine a world in which vulnerable men, lost boys, and confused, scared teenagers are swept up and preyed upon by such communities, which feed on their fears and push them towards hatred, violence, and self-destruction. You don't have to imagine that world. You already guessed that was coming, right? You already live in it. But perhaps you didn't know because we don't like to talk about it. We don't like to risk offending men. We find it hard to think of straight white men as a homogeneous group, though it comes so easily when we think of other types of people, because we are used to affording such men the privilege of discrete identities. These men are complex, heroic, individual. The decisions and choices are seen to spring from a set of distinct and unique circumstances because we see them as distinct and unique people. We don't mind talking about women as a group and about violence against women as a phenomenon, but we do so as though it is something that just happens. We do not, as a rule, talk about male perpetrators of violence against women. We describe a woman having been raped. We discuss the rates of women sexually assaulted or beaten. We do not speak in terms of men committing that rape or being sexual assaulters and violent abusers. That is what makes it so easy to focus on women's dress, behavior, and choices when we consider sexual violence. To warn women to take precautions, to protect themselves and explicitly blame those victims who do not. Because a rape is a shadowy, dark thing waiting to befall women who walk in alleyways wearing short skirts, not a deliberate criminal choice made by real men. When we are forced to confront these men because high-profile cases hit the headlines, we describe them as beasts and monsters in order to separate them clearly from those other ordinary, decent men among them whom we walk every day. We do not count them, quantify them, or study them in any meaningful sense. In fact, we rarely think about them at all. If we talk about masculinity, patriarchy, or male privilege, the conversations are immediately derailed by accusations of generalization and prejudice. Not all men, rises the ubiquitous cry. It is too simplistic, too offensive, too broad, yet we raise few such objections when the crimes of a man with brown or black skin are immediately assumed to be related to his race or religion. To speak ill of masculinity, to describe it in its current societal iteration or something problematic, is seen as an attack on men themselves. To question why some men behave in certain ways is viewed as an assault on all men and thus unacceptable. Yet the opposite is true. Those who speak of toxic masculinity are not criticizing men, but rather defending them, describing an ideology and a system that pressures the boys and men in our societies and our families to conform to unrealistic, unhealthy, and unsustainable ideals. Crushing gender stereotypes are damaging to men as individuals as well as to the society in which they live. Tackling this problem, dismantling these pressures is a matter of life and death for our boys. They are toppling like dominoes into the chasm we leave behind when we tiptoe around and refuse to name the problem. But we do not like to offend men. So we don't mention it. We do not use the word terrorism when describing a crime of mass murder committed by a white man with the explicit intention of creating terror and spreading hatred against a specific demographic group, even though that is the definition of terrorism. If the demographic is in question is women. The man is just disturbed, deranged, a lone wolf. I think we also hear the phrase bad apples quite some time. We use language that designates him an outlier, an aberration. We do not call his online journey a radicalization or use the word extremism to label the online communities in which he has immersed himself through, though we would reach for those words in an instant when describing other similar types of crimes committed by other different types of men. We do not examine what led him to commit those acts or how he became so full of hate. The majority of men are good and kind and would never dream of committing such crimes, but that must not prevent us from recognizing that those who do are not always acting in a vacuum. And if we don't see the connections, if we don't even consider masculinity and its toxic societal construction as a factor at play in these crimes, we will never effectively police or prevent them. This doesn't mean treating all men as the enemy. Quite the opposite. It means embracing the legions of men working at the grassroots level, male activists and educators who are throwing their all into fighting the problem. There exists a real men's movement founded in the late 1960s to complement the booming women's liberation movement and still active today that encompasses communities truly fighting to tackle the many legitimate problems impacting men's lives as well as individual men fighting to defeat issues like relationship violence. It is a movement that seeks to question and dismantle toxic masculinity, realizing that it is as harmful to men as it is to women. but it is threatened and overshadowed by other hateful male movements. This is not just about women and girls. It is also a battle to protect the boys who are lost, who fall through the cracks of our society's stereotypes and straight into the arms of the communities ready to recruit them, greedy to indoctrinate them with fears of threats to their manhood, their livelihood, their country. While pretending that what threatens these boys is women or immigrants or non-white men, the real threat comes from the very forms of rigid manhood, their so-called saviors, or desperate to preserve and promote. Yet, we'd rather stay ignorant of this misogynistic hate movement, actively grooming and radicalizing our boys, than be forced to confront it. Maybe this all sounds very extreme, rather exaggerated. Perhaps you think there might be one or two men online with wild opinions and worrying views about women, but that's just the internet. They're just sad teenagers sitting in their parents' basements, whiling away the hours in a pair of grubby underwear, clutching a bag of Doritos under one arm. They don't pose any real threat. They're more to be pitied than feared. Even the word we use to describe women-hating communities encapsulates this attitude perfectly. Beyond the occasional news report or small circle conversations within feminist activist spheres, most of us do not know about the sprawling web of groups, belief systems, lifestyles, and cults that this book will unravel. Those who do know describe it as a manosphere, like man cave, man flu, and man bag. We use man as a prefix to denote sense of gentle ridicule, suggesting something slightly pathetic, a deviation from traditional masculinity. The manosphere is seen as a joke and therefore harmless, but it isn't. It is an interconnected spectrum of different but related groups, each with their own rigid belief systems, lexicons, and forms of indoctrinations. This book will explore the links in the chain, from incels to pickup artists, men going their own way to men's rights activists, and how they exist as a kind of living, breathing ecosystem in close symbiotic relationship with other online communities like white supremacists and trolls. It will explore the ways in which these groups expand, a vast spiderweb of sites, blogs, forums, chat rooms, groups, and social media accounts, and reveal just how easily boys can blunder across the edges of this web and find themselves stuck. Then gently rolled closer and closer to its center with smooth efficiency. These are communities that exist largely online, the massive underbelly of the iceberg going largely unnoticed and unseen, yet the tip extending into our real world and becoming bolder and sharper every day. Perhaps you think we all need to calm down and remember that what happens online isn't real life. Sticks and stones might break your bones and all that. Maybe you've heard that freedom of speech is under threat, and if millennial snowflakes and PC warriors are allowed to have their way, nobody will ever be able to stop to say anything critical about women or minority groups or the internet again. Or you might have heard that one of our vital freedoms is being undermined by pearl-clutching, humorless women taking offense at a few risk jokes. But what if there's more to it than that? What if it's almost impossible to come to grips with the epidemic of violence facing women and girls when we're not able to clearly name and examine the problem? What if we can't begin to take a comprehensive and effective approach to policing acts of violence because we don't describe them in ways that acknowledge the connections between them? What if we are so inured of particular forms of violence that we consider them cultural, personal, inevitable? What if our ideas about men and women, about misogyny and hate crime, about what terrorists look like, are so trapped in stereotypes that we're making terrible mistakes? What if those mistakes have devastating consequences? And yeah, this is where I'm gonna stop for today. Still have quite a bit left from the introduction, about 3 pages. So yeah, I think this sounds really interesting. I think we all can learn something from this book. So yeah, if you want to come check it out, you can find it in the news section. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this little reading, and I see you again next Saturday.